Good morning, everybody. And I think the favors that I called in are finally working on the weather. So I was a little worried this morning, but I think we're going to get some at least dry weather, which is great for this kind of thing. And obviously, nice fall color. And clearly, salmon, which is why we're here. So thanks for everybody for being here. I'm really excited to have a chance to let you all see this project. I'm Jason Mulvihill-Kuntz. I'm the watershed coordinator for salmon recovery efforts in the Lake Washington Cedar-Sammamish watershed, which is the watershed you're standing in today. Off to my left here is a map of that watershed. This project has been a long time coming. It's the culmination of probably nearly 20 years worth of planning, acquisition, and then finally construction, which we can see today, which just finished back in September. So this is very new, very raw, and John Hansen from King County is going to talk to us a little bit more about the specific design elements of this project, what things were done to really make this site beneficial for salmon, but also beneficial for mitigating flood hazards. So this truly is this multiple benefit type of project, and we have a great lineup of folks here to make a few comments about this project. In addition to John Hansen, who's going to tell us in detail about the project itself, we have Marc Isaacson, who is the director of the Water and Land Resources Division at King County. We'll talk about why King County is doing these kinds of projects. And then we're very glad to have with us Councilmember Larry Phillips from King County. He is also a member of the Raya 8 Salmon Recovery Council, and he's chair of the Cedar River Council as well. And finally, we have the interim director of the Puget Sound Partnership, Mark Daly, here to help tell us how this project fits in more broadly with the overall effort to restore and recover our Puget Sound. So even these little projects on the ground fit into that bigger, broader effort. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John here to tell us more about this project specifically. Once all the speakers are done, we'll have a chance to ask questions, and I encourage you all to do that. And then hopefully we'll have a couple minutes to take a look at the site a little bit more and check out all those salmon that you guys were looking at before. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're standing on what once was the levee that ran along here, referred to as the Rainbow Bend Levee. It's one of many that King County has, but it was placed here to protect an old neighborhood, some single-family residences, and a mobile home park in the back to keep the floodwater out and to keep the river kind of in its place. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way in terms of the river. We see frequent flooding at higher events still get back into the neighborhood, and the river, while constrained in this location, would do damage to the levee that was placed here. Take a sharp turn and go over there to the Cedar River Trail and over close to 169 and really hammer that as well, costing money and flooding people too. So it was kind of a bad spot to be in. I actually have some photos here that I'm going to point to. Here's a photo of this very site. We're standing down here somewhere, as you can see, maybe. There's flooding all over that. This is the 2009 January flood. I think the mobile home park that was back here had been flooded, the single family homes flooded. So, while we had been planning to do this all along and trying to buy property, we were still seeing these flooding concerns continue. So in addition to the flooding, we also had a very simplified channel out here from the standpoint of fish habitat. So all the high energy that was contained in the channel and bang against the bank basically also made it difficult for juvenile salmon and to make a living, if you want to think about it that way. They have to be in the channel all the time, whether it rains or whether it's nice. And so the habitat that might have been here, the floodplain habitat, the edge habitat along the edge, the slow water conditions were absent, basically, when we confine it to these armored channels. So it was a project that was intended to achieve flood reduction, get people out of harm's way, also reduce costs for maintenance of facilities. We don't want to have to come out and fix a levee that doesn't really protect folks or have public infrastructure at risk as well. So there's that flood benefit. There's the habitat benefit of allowing the fish to get out of that high energy environment and be more successful and grow bigger. And then, of course, but to do that, a lot of effort purchasing property, moving along in design, working out complex issues with the neighbors and the concerns about river users and the like. But in the end, we came up with a project I think is pretty good, and I think will do a great benefit to both the community and to the fish. So what we did here is we're standing on what used to be the levee. We had single family homes down here, and we excavated the levee, took the hard angular rock off the bank to allow the river to kind of expand here. The river doesn't like to make these sharp curves, and we'll allow it to move and shift this direction and get rid of some of that energy before it gets down to Renton. Right, so we dissipate some flood issues, but in the meantime we also create habitat. In addition to that, we created some side channels, one right behind us. We kind of cheated a little bit. We looked at aerial photographs and topography, looked to where they used to be, and we kind of tried to connect the dots with what was left, the remnant pieces and parts out here. We also created a backwater channel in the back end of the site for fish to get in out of the energy. It wasn't really probably there, but it was probably part of a larger system. But again, it was a low-lying area, and we're able to get habitat sooner and not rely entirely on how quickly the river may evolve. So I guess in a nutshell, the idea was remove the constraints to the natural river processes, create some areas that would give hints to the river, reconnect historic habitat within the floodplain, and move us in a direction of creating the habitat, or the river can create the habitat, but we're moving in that direction that puts those natural forces to the benefit of creating habitat, but also in reducing flood risk. So again, we're standing on this graphic. There's the bridge, it's right there. And the old levee ran right along here in this color. And this channel here is the side channel behind us. We also did another channel further down that's really intended to take higher level flows. Again, the idea is get the water into the floodplain, dissipate the energy, create the habitat, but let the river forces do that. We also put roughness out in the floodplain because it was a former residential neighborhood. It didn't have the mature forest, didn't have the natural vegetation out here that would have helped slow velocities of the flood flows, and also help maintain a channel or channels that would be beneficial to fish rather than just spread out and go wherever. So the idea was we placed some wood in the floodplain with the idea of creating hard points, so we would direct energy in places that would create and maintain habitat, allowing the river to do it, of course, but using the forces of the river to our advantage and trying to direct them a little bit, but also allowing that all these things would change. And I guess that's the take-home message I'd also like folks to go away with, is that we expect the site to change. Where we're standing 5 years from now, 10 years from now, may very well be in the middle of the river. We expect, because of this sharp curve, that the river should shift this direction. That'll create some new habitat, new kind of gravel bars, other sorts of things. I think there's a graphic that people were given on the bus, mostly, that kind of shows some ideas on how that might happen. But the idea is the river will do it. So it'll change over time, but it'll be the kind of habitat that the river built and the river sustains, and it'll also achieve those flood function as well. So I think we'll move on to the next speaker. Yes?
Very good.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Thank you and good morning. I'm Marc Isaacson, and it's an honor and a privilege to serve King County as the Director of the Water and Land Resources Division. And you're standing here as one demonstration as to why I'm humbled to be in the position I am. Now, Jason gave me some speaking notes, and I'm just not going to use them. Truly, I'm not. It's okay, I'm going to get a couple things across. I'm not going to take a lot of your time because there's more important things to do than hear me. But I want to say a few things that are quite important. Why does King County care about this? Well, you just heard many of the reasons, but you're standing at ground zero, what I call ground zero. Nobody else is calling it that. I'm calling it ground zero for a reason, and I'll explain it in a few minutes of discussion. But the thing that humbles me about our job here is that We are not out in the middle of the wilderness. We are not in the Yukon. We are not revising or restoring lands in Montana. And that, as much as an honor it is to work in those jobs, this is the kind of job in the location where you have multiple benefits, multiple objectives, many things you need to encourage and do. I'm asked, is this a habitat project or a flood project? It's many. It's more than that. It's also a recreational component too. So we manage for flood safety. You've heard about. There was a time here when there was about a mobile home park, 9 single-family mobile homes or single-family houses. We were continually coming out and protecting the residents or acknowledging that there was flooding. I'm not making this story up. There was a time when our staff had to carry people out on their back in the middle of the night after sandbagging their well to get them out of harm's way. We no longer have to put our own staff at that, but the public is no longer at risk. We've moved out many homes here and created a flood benefit to that was also described. We are no longer threatening, or we have reduced the threat to fiber optic cables that are underneath the bike trail. I know about the bike trail, but that fiber optic cable goes from Seattle to Salt Lake City carrying financial data. Incredibly important infrastructure that we're now helping to protect. We're also, as mentioned, we're also looking at having a deposit. The gravel deposits here, doesn't gravel deposit down in Renton. These are all important flood benefits. You can see, I'm not going to talk about the habitat benefits. You can see them in the river now. We've got a side channel that's created with the good work of John Hansen and his team. So there's multiple benefits. I have to mention, this is the most highly used recreational river in King County from the data that we've collected. We cannot ignore that. We have multiple benefits. We have to continue to monitor this to make sure that those river users who use it in the summertime actually are not encountering dangerous elements. You drive through these neighborhoods, you will see rubber rafts or inner tubes in practically every garage sitting there. People use it quite a bit. We cannot ignore that, and we will not ignore that as we go and do these design on projects. So I'm not totally ignoring your thoughts, Jason. Numbers, multiple rivers. I would note there's many partnerships. I don't know, is somebody from Seattle here? City of Seattle, major partner. I've been asked how many funding sources came into this. 9 different funding sources. And that was the good work of the many different state, federal, county, local agencies that we've been able to put together. And finally, I would say none of this happens without the good work of staff, without the good work of the residents, without the good work of those like on the CFT committee who we have here, but also the good work and the leadership that we've had from our county council members, Reagan Dunn, whose district it is, and Larry Phillips, who is here to speak as well. Without that kind of leadership, we wouldn't be able to put these kinds of projects together. And with that, I'm done, I think.
And why is this ground zero?
Sorry. So I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing me back to that. For me, having this kind of urban restoration, 40 acres restored along a river system, the river systems that we're protecting natural resources for the next generation in an urban environment of in the middle of 1.8 million people is very hard to do. That is ground zero. Doing it out in the North Slope of Alaska, incredibly important work to do, but you're not dealing with the many multiple objectives that we have to deal with here, and we have got to face those multiple objectives here. So for me, it's ground zero. Thank you.
What is CFT?
The Conservation Futures Tax. It's one of the many different funding sources that we've used of the 9.
Well, good morning. I'm Larry Phillips, a member of the King County Council and also on the RIA 8 board and founder and chair of the Cedar River Council. So this is very familiar territory to me and a very wonderful issue that I've been involved with for some time. I was looking at all the smiles around here from all the folks who've had a hand on this morning, and I was thinking, well, that's not just because the rain stopped and gave us a reprieve. Those smiles are about one of the big projects that has come our way for a long period of time is finally completed. I'm looking at Jean White right now, and she's been at this for the better part of those 20 years. And it was a dream at one point to be able to make this a reality. It was very daunting in terms of the obstacles we had to overcome. And it was also very daunting in terms of the funding requirement that we'd have to meet that in order to accomplish that. And at one point, actually, I believe this project was taken off the list for accomplishments because it was too daunting and too costly, but persistence prevailed and we were able to bring it back to us. So a big thank you to all of those who hung in there, the staff in particular, that have worked in the RIA 8 effort over a long period of time. A big thank you to all of them who've made this happen, and I want to you should give yourself a round of applause. You know, absolutely, big smiles. Yeah, let's put the hands up of those who had. Come on, everybody who had a hand in this. All right, thank you for your great work. And they are part of a crew that's doing this throughout RIA 8 and throughout this region, making a difference for these resources and also for flood control and the other elements that have been mentioned. I wanted to also thank our other partners who are here, the funding partners. There are folks here from the federal and state, local agencies who've had a hand in this. This would not have happened. You don't put 9 funding sources together without a lot of contributors who said, you know, this is a worthy project and makes it happen. And I want to say that it is daunting here to do this in King County. RIA 8 is one of 3 RIAs in the county, but it has 24% of the state's population right here. So a lot of folks involved in salmon recovery are saying, wow, why should we bother with that in King County or just one part of King County? You're so urban, it'll never happen. Well, this is a resource worth protecting. It's a resource worth bringing people here to, and it's also a resource that has the largest urban fishery in the state, in the country, right here with the return of the sockeye every year. So I'm very familiar with this. I've devoted a fair amount of my professional time to this. I usually, not this last couple of years, but the better part of the last 20 years, rafted this river, taking 35 to 40 people down here in the fall. That was our takeout point right across the river here. So I've seen this when it was a armored revetment, when it was very resistant to anything but shooting water down the river through basically a half pipe and into Renton and causing all kinds of damage along the way. But this is a big project with lots of benefits. So for all the partners, those who hung in here at the staff level, but more importantly, those who are funders or have access to those decision makers, these are the kinds of projects that are going to help us bring back fish and have a better floodplain and flood control throughout our community. And the other part besides recreation, this really is community building as well. There's a tremendous number of citizens who live in this community or who come to this community to make these restoration projects possible. They invest their time, their energy, their devotion to these resources because this is home, and they don't want to give up on these fish, and they don't want to give up on making this a better community. So I'm heartfelt my thanks for them as well, and all of you have helped to make this possible. But I have to say, we're not done. There's a lot more to get done here in terms of salmon recovery. This is not a 5-year or 10-year effort. It's going to take a while. It took 150 years for us to get to this point where fish have really been in trouble and have to be listed on the endangered species list. We can get through that recovery period, but we're going to have, even when at other levels of government they're shutting down and not having work today, we have to be persistent in terms of making sure this resource is recovered and we can continue to have it marked as part of our quality of life here. So I'm pleased to be here with you this morning. Thank you again for all your great work. We've got more to do, but let's celebrate this one, and thank you for the chance to be with you. So.
Now the embarrassing part of needing to lower the microphone. Thank you. Morning, I'm Mark Daly. I'm the interim director of the Puget Sound Partnership, and we're the state agency charged with aligning and holding all of us accountable for Puget Sound recovery. And I'm really excited to be here today because this project is an example of exactly the type of work that needs to be done when we are going to achieve Puget Sound recovery. We in our action agenda, there are 3 strategic initiatives, one of them being protection and restoration of salmon habitat. And it's amazing to see today, the example, we've got sockeye salmon in a channel that was just cut during the last work window. It's really inspiring to see what this type of project can do. And also I want to say it's inspiring to see the vision that it took to make this project happen. This is an example of how it does take a watershed to make projects like this occur. It's been going on for at least about 20 years. And when I was in grad school, actually I did my research on the Cedar River watershed, and I went to many Cedar River Council meetings. And I was telling Councilman Phillips and Gene White before that this project was being discussed then, and it was too difficult, too big to tackle, because we've talked a lot today about how it's multi-benefit. Multi-benefit also means multi-challenge. And our funding sources have tended to be too compartmentalized to make a project like this happen. And so I also want to acknowledge that this is a great example, and again, visionary, a little ahead of its time, of what just occurred in the state legislature this past session, where the legislature passed a $50 million coordinated floodplain capital program that is designed specifically to make projects like this happen, so that it won't take 20 years to make a project like this occur, so that there is a fund source that can account for the flood protection benefits and the habitat restoration benefits. It can't be an either-or proposition if we're going to be successful, when we're going to be successful. And so I also want to acknowledge Senator Hasegawa, Representative Magendas, and former Senator Phil Rockefeller. Thank you, because it's that sort of leadership, that sort of vision to make a program like this new $50 million capital program happen, especially in a legislative session that was as difficult as it was. So thank you for your leadership in that. This is going to help us get to the Puget Sound, to a recovered Puget Sound by 2020. This is not just a King County Cedar River project. This is a Puget Sound project. And I thank you all the partners involved in this. Thank you for your work. I'm really humbled to be here today and appreciate it greatly. And I'd like to invite the elected officials to get a photo with all of us to commemorate this moment.
I think the speakers as well. So those folks, why don't they come on up and we'll get a photo and make sure we capture that. 1, 2, 3, salmon.